On the 29th of February 1836, William IV was king, Lord Melbourne was Prime Minister, not that one, that one. Mexico was laying siege to the Alamo, and a certain unknown writer was about to publish the first ever chapter of his first ever novel. Meanwhile, on Merseyside, William Lynn, the proprietor of the Waterloo Hotel, was fulfilling his ambition of bringing a grand steeplechase to Liverpool for the first time. Lynn's grand Liverpool steeplechase would be run at Aintree racecourse near the city. It would be a distance of not less than 5 miles and would take the runners away from the actual racecourse over the ordinary fields of the farms nearby. Essentially, the runners would jump the 16 hedges, banks and ditches that would separate those fields down to a brook at the far end of the land before turning left and making towards the canal. Once there, they would turn left again, back over the brook, race back towards the Anchor Bridge crossing, which would take the runners back into the training ground of the racecourse itself. The runners would then run the full length of the racecourse, jumping 2 stiff hurdles in front of the stands, before setting off and doing it all over again for a second circuit. And the real beauty of Lynn's course was that you could see the whole event from the stands, although many would probably choose to follow after the runners on horseback themselves. As for those runners, 10 of them chose to take part in that first Grand Liverpool steeplechase, a selling race of 10 sovereigns with 80 added. The winner would be sold for 200 sovereigns, the second would save their stake, and all the runners would carry 12 stone. The day dawned fine, which was good because the main road to Aintree wasn't tarmacked in those days and could turn into a quagmire on a wet afternoon. It also meant the great and the good from Lord Sefton's party at Croxteth Hall made their way to Aintree, which included a fair few ladies of the time too. All of this assemblage took their place in the stands shortly after 1 o'clock to witness the 10 runners parade in front of them. The prices quoted here are the shortest price quoted by any given newspaper on that day, because the prices varied so wildly. The colours are correct, although the styles may not quite be right, and we know all of the jockeys with the exception of one for certain. Polyanthus could have been ridden by any one of 3 riders, Mr. Wilmot, Dick Christian, or his son Charles. The race umpire, Lord Molyneux, advised the 10 riders before the event that all they need do was simply ride outside the flags that had been placed along the course. They weren't allowed to ride through any gateways that had been left closed or ride down any laneways that took them outside the flags. Anything else basically was allowed, and the race certainly proved that that would be the case. If the final race time of 20 minutes and 10 seconds is to be believed, the runners must have set off at an incredibly slow pace, over twice the time it would take a horse in the 21st century to complete the course. That said, it's possible the course was a little bit longer than it is today. That slow time could also in part be blamed on some, if not even all 10 runners, refusing at the very first fence. All 10 did negotiate the fence eventually, with Derry seeming to be the one that took up the early lead, as they ran over a series of stiff fences down to the brook at the far end of the country. The competitors seemed to negotiate those fences out in the country without any major incident though, and as they emerged at the top of the course on what was known as the training ground, it could be seen that 8 of the 10 runners were still well in contention. Only Cowslip and Gulliver were missing. It's not known whether either of them fell, but they were certainly tailed off at this stage. The Duke was giving his supporters a good race for Captain Beecher and led the field over the 2 stiff hurdles in front of the stands. At this stage, Laurie Todd was last of the 8, but appeared to be doing what jockeys for decades to come would also copy, staying well to the rear and hunting through the first circuit. Sure enough, Laurie Todd began to make his move as they moved down towards the brook that would later carry Captain Beecher's name on the second time round. By now, the race was taking shape. Laurie Todd and the Duke were fighting it out, pretty much as the bookies expected, but Polyanthus was going well. Cock-a-Hoop was right in with the hunt as well. Derry wasn't beaten yet, and Percy was still going too. It was now that the biggest controversy of the race took place. On the first circuit, just before the Anchor Bridge, the horses had run through an open gateway. One of the spectators took exception to this, and with a series of cursing and swearing, took 2 nails and a hammer and promptly nailed the gate shut. By the time the runners reached this stage of the course, Powell really had Laurie Todd in a great position, and many of the spectators expected him to go on and win the race. However, finding the gate shut, he had no alternative but to try and jump the obstacle. It was too tall, Laurie Todd crashed to the ground, and Powell found his chances about to end. Powell's rivals appear to have had time to have avoided the gate, and all those who were still in the race managed to bypass it successfully. Powell himself also had time to get up and attempt to remount, still with the chance of winning the race. It was here, though, that Bartholomew Bretherton on board Cock-a-Hoop seems to have deliberately steered his horse towards Powell, knocking him back to the ground and indeed injuring him. But it all seems to have been perfectly fair for the time. At this point, the race appeared to lie between Percy, the Duke, Polyanthus, Cock-a-Hoop and the Baronet, with the remaining 2 runners, other than Laurie Todd, now seemingly beaten. But by the time they reached the hurdles, it was very much a 2-horse race. The Duke and Polyanthus had been racing neck and neck since the training ground, leaving their 3 rivals behind. And although both horses managed to plough through the final hurdle, leaving a huge gap for the other 3 to follow, they managed to keep going without breaking stride. It was a ding-dong battle right to the line, and it was only the superior jockeyship of Martin Beecher at the very end that managed to ensure that the Duke got up to win cleverly, for between 1 and 2 lengths. Polyanthus, carrying 4 pounds overweight, was a very gallant second, although some claim that it was his inexperienced jockeyship that may have cost him the victory, not to mention those 4 pounds. That would suggest that it probably wasn't Dick Christian who was riding the horse. Third place is disputed by the various journalists who were in attendance, though more than one agreed that Cock-a-Hoop appears to have been third. Others said it could have been Percy, could have been Derry, could have been the Baronet. It seems Percy was probably fourth. Derry and Baronet may have finished as well, and there's no mention of the rank outsider, the Sweep, who seems to have been tailed off some point during the second circuit. The umpire, Lord Molyneux, launched an instant investigation into who nailed the gate shut, though there was no inclusion in that investigation of the actions of Bartholomew Bretherton in deliberately riding down Powell. Powell, meanwhile, was at a nearby farmhouse being treated for his injuries by an on-course doctor, which, fortunately, weren't severe. A £10 reward was issued for anyone who could give information that would lead to the naming of the culprit who nailed the gate shut, and although no name was ever actually given, it is known that it turned out to be the brother of one of the other owners of one of the other competitors. The finger of suspicion points at the Cock-a-Hoop camp, but that's only based on the actions of Bartholomew Bretherton in riding down Powell during the race. The selling clause, meanwhile, on the Duke, doesn't seem to have been implemented, and suggests that it was just put in there to deter lesser horses from taking part. As for the 1836 Grand Liverpool Steeplechase itself, it was considered a huge success, and it's probably only the failure of the 37 and 38 races that followed that have resulted in this particular race not being regarded genuinely as a Grand National. Don't be fooled by the whole Maghull story about races that followed on after this. Races didn't take place at Maghull. They ran continuously from 1836 up until the First World War. Sadly, historians in the 1890s decided that the 1836 story didn't suit and gradually dropped it out. It's officially known now that the first official record of a Grand National is regarded as 1839. But being no doubt that people in the 1830s saw no difference between what happened in 1839 and what happened in 1836, except to say that there was better organisation in 39 and the railway had opened, which meant for bigger crowds than they got in 1836. But the Honours Board really does deserve to have the name of the Duke and Captain Martin Beecher on it, and for Beecher to be remembered by Grand National history as not just the jockey who fell in Beecher's brook and didn't like the taste of water, but the man who actually steered the first winner to victory.